Hey guys, what's going on? Nerf here, and I'm not going to be wasting any time. We're going to do this right now. Like I said in the last video I posted, I was planning on doing a very detailed, very thorough breakdown of the entire Champions League portion of the ALPH. I've ranked all the teams from 16th to 1st. I think you guys are going to really enjoy this. I had a lot of fun putting it together. It was a fair amount of work, and yeah, I think everyone likes hearing someone else talk about their team, so let's hop into it. Oops. So, I've watched, I'm not the most experienced draft battler in the world, but I've watched a lot of Draft League. I've listened to a lot of people who are a lot better than me, top coaches in the GBA, the UCL, things like that. I've also watched a lot of draft analysis commentary from coaches. One thing that I don't like about the way a lot of people have done draft analysis or analyses in the past is a lot of people have they go about it from a very subjective point of view. So you get comments like, you know, Team A, you know, I don't really think it's that great because it's not a team that I would like. And from my point of view, it doesn't really matter if you like the team or not. That's not an objective way of actually looking at the teams. So what I decided to do was get some numbers. I wanted to have some numbers. I wanted to have a more objective way of looking at the teams. And then for the video portion, I would just kind of add my own commentary on top of that. But what I ended up doing was I ended up giving every team a score. So I know you guys might be thinking, what the fuck is a pie chart doing in a Pokemon Draft League analysis? So this is the portion, this is how I broke the scores down for each team. So I gave 25%, so everyone was rated out of 100. And if you guys want to skip right ahead and just look at your team's portion, that's totally fine. I'm not going to be offended by that or anything. Just please watch the beginning just so I don't get a ton of questions afterwards as to how I actually went about scoring all the teams. So 25% of your team score came from core types. So did you or did you not have the really important types that you should have on a draft, a Pokemon draft team? 20% came from type effectiveness. So did you have, you know, 6 ice weaknesses and no ice resistances? Obviously that'd be a big problem for your team. Speed tiers. So I did head-to-head comparison of all 16 teams just to see who had the fastest speeds, slowest speeds, the greatest variance in speeds. Hazard control, so how many hazard setters do you have? How many hazard removals do you have? Offense defense split, so do you have an even split of offensive attackers? So do you have some physically or, you know, you should have about half of your team hit physically offensive, another half hit specially offensive, kind of things like that. Ideally, you should have a nice even split. And then nerf score, so just my own 10 of your own marks came from just my opinion. This scoring is not exhaustive. It doesn't take into account every aspect of what you should have on a good draft team. I don't have any priority here, which I think is important. I think every team should have 1 or 2 good priority users. So in certain cases where I feel like some teams were unfairly benefiting or fairly or unfairly benefiting from the scoring system, I was able to adjust marks by a little bit. The nerf score didn't really affect placing very much. But I just left 10 marks there for me to make any kind of adjustment I felt that was kind of maybe necessary based on the scoring system. So that's all sums to 100%. So to give you an idea of how it was scored for cores, again, this is not coming from me. This is not my opinion. This has come from listening to a lot of coaches that play Draft League. They're a lot better than me, that know their stuff. And it's kind of a consensus as to what types you should have on your team in a Draft League. And if you're missing some of these types, it can potentially be problematic for your team. So most of these types come in the 3 main cores, so Steel, Dragon Fairy, Fire, Water, Grass, and Fighting Dark, Psychic, and Ground. So the way you got points for this, for the types that fill up the 3 main cores, so again, Steel, if you had one of these on your team, you got 2 points for that type. So if you dropped it to Steel type Pokemon, you got 2 points. If you finished one of your 3 cores, you got an additional 1.5 points. So that meant each fully completed core was a total of 7.5 points, and then ground was 2.5 points on its own, just because ground is just a great type to have on a draft league team. It means you get stab, earthquake, it means you can deny volt switches, things like that. So these are the 10 types that, again, both myself and coaches I've listened to in the past feel that teams should have these types on them if they want to have a really well-balanced, well-rounded draft league team. So these all summed up to be 25 points. Next was for, and I can't remember whose team this ended up being, but this was for the type effectiveness. So again, ideally, on any well-rounded team, any weaknesses you have should be balanced by resistances. So if I have 2 Pokemon weak to fire, I should have 2 that resist fire. If I have 5 weak to ground, I should have 5 that that resist ground or more. That's certainly more ideal. If I have 2 weak to fire, it'd be nice to have 4 resistant to fire, because in that case, no one can take advantage of that typing. So the way I did it with this was pretty simple, pretty straightforward. I looked down through all typings, all 18 types. Every any category or any typing where you had more weaknesses than you had resistances, you were docked 1 point. So essentially, every team started with 20 points. In this example here for flying, this team, I don't know if my mouse will show up here. I think it should show up. For this individual, they had 3 weaknesses to flying, only 2 resists, so they get docked 1 point. On this team as well, they had 3 weak to ground, only 1 resistant to ground, so they get docked 2 points. So really simple scoring for that. The more you had weaknesses than you had resist, the more points you were going to get docked. For speed tiers, this wasn't any one rating that any team got. I did a head-to-head comparison of all 16 teams. So essentially what I did was I calculated the average speed, the standard deviation of the speed, the maximum minimum speeds on each team, and the total speed range. So how much, essentially your max minus your min. Good teams would have about 100 range, so your fastest Pokemon would be at 130, slowest speed would be around 30, so you'd have at least 100 range on your speeds. And I did a head-to-head comparison, and I placed everyone from 1st to 16th. And this category again was 15 points. So the team that I felt had the best speed tier got 15 points, and then I took off half a point for every team that follows. The second place team got 14.5, third place got 14, things like that. What we were looking for here as far as like what makes a good speed tier and why does it matter? Obviously a high average speed is good. If your team's faster than your opponent, that means you're always going to be attacking first. You're going to be forcing them to run Scarfers. But you don't want to just have a team that's just fast. You want to have a nice distribution of speed stats as well. If you have 5 Pokemon on your team that are all at a speed of 100, it makes it really easy for your opponent to EV speed their own Pokemon if they know that you have a whole bunch of Pokemon that are the same speed. So breaking up those kind of accumulations, and instead of having 5 at 100, maybe have 1 at 80, 1 at 90, 1 at 100, 1 at 110, 120. It averages out to be the same 100 average speed, but it's a nicer distribution. You also don't have a team that's too fast, because then that leaves you open to getting just run over by Trick Room teams. And that was the case for some of the teams in the league. I think some of the teams had slowest Pokemon being 50. If your slowest Pokemon is 50, slower Pokemon like Conkeldurr, Rhyperior, things like that can just tear through your team if they get up under the effects of Trick Room, just because they're such hard-hitting mons, and typically speaking, faster teams are more fragile teams. In order to get that speed, you end up sacrificing some bulk, so it makes your team really vulnerable to Trick Room. Like I said, offensive defense split. You should have half of your Pokemon on your team be able to hit physically, half your team hit specially. This is my team. This is an example of how I broke it down. So the way I went about this was for offense, I wrote down all 12 Pokemon on each team. I then put a check in either a physical column or special column. Are they physically offensive or specially offensive? And I was looking for 7 in each category. We have 12-man rosters or 12-mon rosters. I felt, in my opinion, that a really well-balanced team should have at least 7 in each. And I know what you're thinking, how can you get 7 in each? That would be 14. Most teams should have some mixed attackers. So my example here is that I only really had one on my team in Shaman. Shaman can be physically offensive or specially offensive. So I should be able to, a good team should be able to hit 7 in each. Any case where you didn't hit 7, so I only have 5 physically offensive Pokemon and 6 specially, so I lost 3 points in the offensive point portion. So the most you can get is 7.5. On the defensive side, I have 8 physically defensive Pokemon, only 6 specially, so I lost 1 off of there, so I scored a total of 11 out of 15. For this, again, people can probably tally up their own score if they want to, and I know a lot of people would argue as to what constitutes physically offensive and what constitutes especially offensive. The way I did it was what is a reliably, so like in the case of Zygarde, I'm sure you could make a case of Zygarde 50% being brought as a specially offensive one week. Put a choice specs on there or something like that. He gets a decent special coverage, but that's not really a reliable set. It's not a set that I'm going to be running probably ever. It's not something that is going to work nearly as well as a physically offensive Zygarde set. So I didn't score it as special. Again, it could happen, but it's just not really that realistic. So that's kind of how I went about scoring these mons. Otherwise, everyone would have been 7 or more in every category. Last is for hazard setters. So again, this summed up to be 15 each. So I give it 7.5 points for hazard setters. In my opinion, every team should have at least 3 stealth rock setters and at least 2 other forms of hazards, so either spikes, toxic spikes, or webs. For hazard removers, you should have at least 3 defoggers, just because how common defog is now, and at least 2 rapid spinners. And I don't believe any team got 15 and 15 in this category, because again, the bar is pretty high in that regard. Again, this is an example. We're using my team here, so I only have 1 stealth rocker. I did have 2 other forms of hazards. I only have 1 defogger and 1 rapid spinner. So every tick in the category, or in each of the 4 categories, gives you 1.5. For hazard sitters, that means you can get a max score of 7.5, and for hazard removers, a max score of 7.5, summing to 15. Anyone that you're missing in these categories is subtracted 1.5. So for me, I had 1 stealth rocker, 2 other forms of hazards. That gives me a 4.5 for hazard setting score. And for hazard removers, my removal sucks on my team, so I only have 1 defogger, 1 rapid spinner, so only a score 3 for hazard removal. And then, like I said, I left 10 points just for my own score. So that all summed to 100. Yeah, I think that's decently clear. Kind of sped through that, didn't want to spend too much time. So yeah, with that, let's get into the teams. So the way we're going to be doing this is I'm going to be starting from the bottom and working our way up. So first up is going to be the team number 16. And I do apologize to whoever this team is. Let's just check here. Okay, I got my notes on my side here for some decent commentary, hopefully. Just want to say, this is just totally for fun. The reason I'm doing this is because I absolutely love Draft League. I love Draft League. I think it's so much fun. I think it's fun to talk about. I think it's fun to battle. I think it's fun to talk about battles. It's just really fun to talk about. I love the draft portion of Draft League, and I enjoy watching draft commentary videos, just talking about the drafts, so I kind of figured I would do this. Again, I think most people like hearing other people talk about their team, so I thought some people might enjoy watching this video, but this video is just for fun. It doesn't mean anything. I only know 4 coaches in Champions League, so this says nothing to how I think people will place in the league. This is just commentary on how I think your draft team finished, how balanced I think it is, maybe how if there's areas to improve. That's it. It says nothing about how I think of you as a battler or anything like that, so don't take it too seriously. This is just for fun. So first up are the Greenville Blazekins, coached by Jerome O'Connor. So this is the 16th place team with a score of 72.5, so I guess it should be said right up front. If you wanted to convert these into like letter grades, this would be like a B-. So if this is the worst team, B- is pretty solid, I would say, for the league, if this is the low end of where we scored. And just doing this analysis for all the teams in the league, I would agree that I think people did a pretty damn good job. I think most of the teams are pretty damn good. So just in case anyone's listening to this and not watching it, I'll go through the whole roster for each team. So Jerome, he drafted Heatran, Mega Scizor, Dugtrio, Slowbro, Tornadus Eye, Snorlax, Kyurem, Zebstrika, Slurpuff, Hitmontop, Ditto, and Torchic. So for the way this is going to work for some of the lower ranked teams, we're going to be talking a little bit more about kind of what are some of the drawbacks of the teams, and as for some of the higher ranked teams, we'll be talking about what did they do right. So in the case of Jerome, again, I think it's a team that if you look at on paper is pretty threatening. Mega Scizor is arguably one of the best Megas available in draft format. Heatran is obviously a monster. Dugtrio is great. Slowbro is awesome. I love Slowbro. I've had it in 2 previous draft leagues, and it's been probably, you could argue it's been my MVP in both times I've had it. I think it's an outstanding mon, really good defensively. Regenerator is awesome. Tornadus Eye is very threatening. Snorlax is an awesome, very threatening Curse mon. And he has some kind of cool support options with some of his other mons. He has Ditto, which is a great addition to any draft team, in my opinion. Hitmontop, even though he doesn't have the best hazard removal, Jerome only has 2 removal options. He has 1 defogger in Scizor and 1 rapid spinner in Hitmontop, but the removal he has is very good. Mega Scizor is a great defogger. It's not something that wants to run defog all the time. It kind of has it's not terrible, but it has some form of move slot syndrome. Generally speaking, Mega Scizor is going to want to run U-turn, Bullet Punch, Sword Stance, and probably either Roost or a coverage move. So it doesn't really want to have defog every week. But when it does bring defog, it's a very good defogger. Him on top's obviously a great spinner. So not a lot of removal options, but the options he has are very good. The one thing I thought about this team, though, when I was first looking at it and thinking about what I would want to talk about it, was the first 2 picks that Jerome went for. I don't totally agree with the decision to draft them back-to-back, just because Heatran and Scizor, they're both steel types. I do understand that they neither share the same weaknesses. Heatran's 4 times weak to ground, Scizor is neutral to ground, Scizor's 4 times weak to fire, and Heatran is immune to fire with Flash Fire. So defensively, they're not actually that bad of options, and I think both individually they're very good. But both of these mons generally want to be played offensively. You know, Heatran's a very deadly offensive mon, so is Mega Scizor, and they both get walled by fire types, or at least their dual stab does. They also both struggle to some extent against bulky water types. And I do think that's probably one of the areas where Jerome kind of got hurt on his team, is just because there's not a lot of variety in his first 2 picks. So all these slides are going to be set up this way. All the rosters are in the order in which they were picked. So he picked Heatran first, Scizor, then Dugtrio, and yeah, I think there could have been something better picked up after Heatran that might have added a little more variety up top. I'm also not entirely sure if Dugtrio is going to benefit this team a ton, just because Dugtrio ideally wants to be played in that it can come in, trap something weak to ground, and just immediately remove it from the team. And it works best on teams that generally struggle against certain mons that are weak to Dugtrio. So if a team is weak to, let's say, Nihilego, getting Dugtrio could be awesome, because you bring Dugtrio in on Nihilego, and Nihilego is guaranteed gone unless it has Shed Shell. But I don't really see that on this team unless I'm missing something. Like in the case of Nihilego, this team doesn't appear weak to me. To Nihilego, it doesn't appear weak to things like... it could be weak to Magnezone, but like Mega Scizor and Heatran get enough coverage that they can revenge kill Magnezone. Scizor gets superpower, Heatran is a fire type, so I'm not really sure if they even care about Magnezone or Magneton. Not entirely sure. This team's not... I know it's a 16th place team, but it's not a bad team by any means. If going over my notes for where Jerome lost points, there was no one area that was like, okay, this is a big problem area. It was kind of just across the board where he was losing some things. Could have had more hazard stacking options, could have had more hazard removal, as we talked about. He is missing Dark and Grass on his team, so he doesn't have... he actually only has 1 complete core in Steel Dragon Fairy. He hasn't completed any other core in the team. Grass I do think is important just because of the types it resists. It has a very niche role in competitive Pokemon in that it resists electric, water. It's one of the few resistances to ground, so I do think missing a grass type on the team can be pretty big. And he's also missing Dark, and Dark is just a great defensive typing as well. It fills out that Fighting Dark Psychic core. So there are a couple things like that. Pretty good speed on this team. But yeah, I do think that just there's not as much versatility on this team that I think that there could have been. And yeah, I do think that the double steel type early on, from a competitive standpoint, would maybe not be the best idea for this team. That's pretty good. That's about 5 minutes, so I think it's probably pretty good for each team. I'm going to try to be like 5 minutes for each team, just get some good commentary in. Let's get my water ready, because I know I'm going to need it. This is going to be long. So coming in at number 15 is the Milan Mimes Memes, coached by Amir. And Amir scored 73, so just a little bit above Jerome. Let me just click over to my other notes. So Amir has a team of Mega Altaria, Rotom Wash, Darmanitan, Magneton, Mienshao, Alolan Muck, Politoed, Bronzor, Scizor, Ludicolo, Clamperl, and Gliscor. So right away, one of the things I spotted on this team when I was doing my analysis was that Amir has 3 steel types. Definitely think there could have been a little more, could have switched it up a little bit. I think when it comes to draft, especially with 12 mons, that's something, it's something different for me. The only leagues I've competed in have been, there's been no tier 6, so it's only been rosters of 11 Pokemon. In the case of 12, you should expect some overlap, like dual water, dual flying on the team, just because of how many Pokemon you have to pick, but 3 for one typing is perhaps a little bit too much. And I do think too that Amir did fill out all his cores, but I believe, just looking at his team right now, the only psychic Pokemon he has on his team is Bronzor. So as a tier 6, using your tier 6 to fill out your cores is probably not that ideal in my opinion. He did a great job though of covering his weaknesses. Of the few things that his team is weak to, he has counters or answers for virtually all of them. The only category that he's a little bit weak to is ground. So he has 5 ground weaknesses. And I think 2 resists. I think, although that's not counting. So I took the typings from just the doc that Cloud had put together. I don't believe these calcs or these weaknesses in resist account for levitate. So I don't think Rotom Wash's levitate's counted for that. So if you don't count it, he has a bit of a disparity there between for ground weaknesses and resists. But again, if you look at the team, I don't think it's that bad. Altaria is immune before it megas. Rotom Wash has levitate. Scizor doesn't mind ground types too much. Ludicolo is a nice resist. Glasgow is immune too. So as far as typing goes, I don't think Amir really has anything on his team. I don't think there's any one type that you can look at and go, okay, I can use this type and take advantage of Amir's team. Magneton's kind of cool on the team, just because I think this team, the biggest danger or threat I see on this team is Mega Altaria. Mega Altaria is just absolutely terrifying. It can run Dragon Dance, Earthquake, Return, and Outrage, and there's pretty much nothing that can come in and take that. Outside of maybe like a Flying Steel type like Skarmory or Celesteela, and Magneton helps deal with those threats quite nicely. I really like Darmanitan. Darmanitan's a monster. It just, in most matchups, it can come in and kill pretty much anything if it runs like Choice Band. It's just a beast. I think the water pickup late in the game was, I kind of had mixed feelings about it. Politoed, in my opinion, is not a great. I wish it was a lower tier, just because it really only sets water. That's really all it does. And Ludicolo is a pretty good rain sweeper. It's definitely not the best, but it is something that Amir picked it up much later on in the draft. It was his third last pick, and it did add a different form of threat to his team. Although it should be noted again that he also has, well, I said that Amir has 3 steel types. He does have 3 water types as well. Kind of an accumulation of types in that regard. Not the best speed distribution on this team. This team's pretty slow. I don't think he has anything. Actually, what's Mienshau's speed? I think Mienshao might be the only Mon on Amir's team that's over 100. I think it's over 100. So it's a pretty slow team. So Amir could be taking advantage of it in that regard. It's not the best speed options on the team. Hazard's a little bit weak on this team too. Amir doesn't have a Rapid Spinner. He has quite a few Defoggers, which is definitely solid. Rotom Wash is an awesome Defogger, so is Gliscor. So I don't think they'll have issues getting rid of Hazards, but he will have a hard time keeping up his own if he wants to get rid of Hazards on his side, just because he'll have to rely on Defog every time. Also only has 2 Stealth Rockers, so a little bit limited in terms of what he can get up. Bronzor is decent with Eviolite. It's actually not that terrible, so he could bring it for Hazards. Gliscor is obviously really good for Hazards as well. So yeah, it's again, I don't think these teams, even these lower teams, are particularly bad. I think there's some areas where they could improve. I think the biggest thing for Amir is if he can find some trades where he could pick up some speed. I think his team would be a lot better. I think it'd be much more threatening if he could pick up a little bit of speed, maybe drop some of these redundant types, and pick up some faster Mons. So that's for the Milan Mimes memes at 15th place. So coming in at 14th. Sorry, Clyde. Sorry, buddy. We have the 14th place team, the Colorado Mamoswine. I know Clyde's going to update his logo. This is not going to be his logo for long, I don't think. Yeah, sorry, Clyde. Nothing personal. Just yeah, I came up with my scoring, I guess, strategy, and then I just started inputting teams into it, and this is what the numbers came out to be. So Clyde has a score of 73.5, and his team, his very threatening team, consists of Landorus T, Hawlucha, Tapu Fini, Deoxys Speed, Rotom Heat, Zoroark, Hypno, Sceptile, Drifloon, Rampardos, Scyther, and Mega Aggron. One thing I'll say right up front about this team is that I think I would not look at the placing on this team and disregard Clyde. This is a super threatening team, It definitely has some weaknesses that are kind of fairly obvious, but if you just look at some of the individual threats on the team, Clad's going to run over some people in this season. One of the things that my eyes were drawn to, which other people might not see, I think most people are going to look at the Hawlucha Tapu Fini. What caught my eye was the Landorus and Aggron, Mega Aggron. I think these two Pokemon cover each other's weaknesses so beautifully that I think people are going to have a really hard time getting through those two Pokemon. Just because Landorus, its biggest concern is ice. Mega Aggron resists ice, and Aggron's biggest fears are ground, which Landorus is immune to, and fighting, which Landorus resists. So if he ever decides to bring Landorus T as a defensive set and Mega Aggron as a defensive set, I don't think anyone's going to get through them. You'll have to hope to be a really strong fighting type or have a really strong fighting type on your team with ice coverage. I don't know, Mamoswine could maybe get through this team, but essentially what I'm trying to say is I think there's very few mons that can get through that duo. And I haven't even talked about Hawlucha and Tapu Fini yet. The Tapu Fini and Hawlucha duo is so deadly. Pairing a Tapu with Hawlucha, any type of Tapu with Hawlucha, is just so threatening, just because you can set your Tapu terrain, switch in Hawlucha, it uses its seed or burns its seed, gets the defense boost. It's now unburdened. It can generally, if you do it in the right situation, you can then get off a sword stance or a bulk up, and now you can fire off high jump kicks or acrobatics and just kill everything. The only types that, flying and fighting is just such a good duo, just because flying type is just so great overall in that it's only resisted by rock and steel, kind of electric, but there's not a lot of bulky electric types around. So pretty much just rock and steel, and high jump kick deals with rock and steel. So there's very little that can take hits from Hawlucha. He picked up the Deoxys speed, so Deoxys was allowed to be legal in this league. Very fast. Clad has the highest average speed of all the teams in the Champions League, and like I said, though, that doesn't necessarily mean you have the best speed tiering, in my opinion, anyways. One thing this team does lack is it lacks a very slow threatening mon. Mega Aggron's pretty slow at 50, but it's not. There's a lot of threatening mons that are lower than 50, and again, I think Clyde's team is one of those teams that could be taken advantage of with a Trick Room user, just because his team's so fast. Outside of those threats, I think there could have been a little bit more support given to this team. I think there's a little bit of redundancy in the forms of things like Sceptile. I don't think Clyde really needs that kind of speed in a Grassmon. I think a more defensive Grassmon might have been nicer. The Rampardos, again, you have a Landorus T in your team. Landorus T is arguably one of the best tier 1s in Draft League, but it's also arguably one of the best physical wall breakers. And that's really all Rampardos does, is break walls on the physical side with mono rock type, whereas I think Landorus T probably does that even better. So I'm not sure Rampardos was the best pickup. Clyde is also missing a Dragon type on his team. Not the end of the world from an offensive point of view, just because of how offensive this team is. I don't think it needs more offense, but Dragon type is also a pretty good defensive typing. It's only weak to Ice, Fairy, and Dragon, and it resists pretty much all the elements outside of Ice. So Electric, Grass, Fire, Water, things like that. So it is an important type that I think that's missing from this team. Clyde also, just like the previous team, doesn't have any Rapid Spinner. So if he wants to keep his own hazards up while removing hazards on his side, he's not going to be able to do that, just because his only options are Defog. A couple problems with effect are he is weak to a few types where he doesn't have effective counters or effective resists to them. So yeah, just to kind of summarize about this team, I think Clyde's team is really threatening. I think he's going to have quite a few 6-0 wins, if I'm being completely honest. I think just because the combination of Landorus and Mega Aggron, and then the combination of Hawlucha, Tapu Fini, that is just so threatening. He could bring those 4 mons every week. I feel like there's no matchup that is going to be so good against those 4 that he's going to feel like he can't bring them. But yeah, just outside of those 4, I think there was maybe a couple opportunities where he could have gotten some better support for those 4 mons. But yeah, a very threatening team, and I expect Clyde to dominate at least a few weeks in this league. So coming in at number 13 is the Richmond Rhenoclus, coached by Revez Surge, and Revez scored a score of 74.5. Revez is one of the few coaches that I do know that I've known outside of the ALPH. I've known him in a couple other leagues. He's a great guy. I really like Revez. He definitely has a style in terms of how he drafts. So he picked up Cresselia, Skarmory, Sylveon, Zygarde 10%, Mega Houndoom, Milotic, Roserade, Ambipom, Hitmontop, Vulpix, Misdreavus, and Jolteon. I don't think I'm the only one that kind of scratched my head at the first round Cresselia pick. Cresselia is great. By no means am I trashing on this mon at all. It's something that I've looked at myself in pretty much every draft I've been involved with. It's always been something I've wanted to get, but I've never gotten it because it goes so early. And yeah, I mean, there's something to be said about picking it up round 1 just because of that fear. So I know Revez wanted Mew. That got taken, was it first pick? I think it was first picked. So he went with Cresselia. Cresselia Skarmory, just a disgusting defensive duo. It's just ridiculous. Like, good luck getting through just those 2 Pokemon. Sylveon, he picked up even more bulk after that. He's got Sylveon, Milotic. This is a very bulky team. The one problem I see with this team, and to be completely honest, I do think it is a fairly big problem, is that Revez on this team seems to have either bulk, slow bulk, or fast fragile mons. And you can kind of say that for every single thing on this team. So Cresselia, Skarmory, Sylveon, Milotic, all very slow, all very bulky. Zygarde, Mega Houndoom, Roserade, Ambipom, Hitmontop, Misdreavus, Jolteon, all very fast, very fragile. He doesn't really have that one, or even a few mons that are kind of average speed, but have great stats outside of speed. They're bulky, they hit hard, they're threatening in a lot of different ways. I do feel like Revez is going to be kind of forced into either bringing hyper offense or stall. He's going to have a hard time kind of bringing a balanced set each week just because of the way that these teams are set up. And outside of Zygarde, he doesn't really have any good setup mons. Hitmontop is pretty good, and then it can take advantage of Unburden. Cresselia can sweep with Calm Mind. It's a little limited though. Like Houndoom can get Nasty Plot, so there are some options. But yeah, I just do think that his team's a little bit too split into these kind of 2 identities. He either has bulk or he has a very fast fragile mons. Revez, I'm not on the wrong notes. So Revez is kind of like a lot of the coaches so far. It's been kind of a common theme for some of the bottom teams in that he doesn't have the best hazard removal options. He's 1 spinner, 1 defogger. But I mean, he has Skarmory. Skarmory kind of wins all hazard battles, hazard setting and hazard removing. So I don't think it's that bad. He filled out all his cores. He plays pretty well in the speed tiering comparison. Again, because he has a lot of these faster mons. I do think he had a lot of accumulation though. I think he has, what are the mons? I think Zygarde 10%, Mega Houndoom, and Ambipom, I believe, are all 115. So he did have a bit of an unhealthy accumulation of Pokemon at these same speed tiers. And again, as I talked about earlier, you don't want to have a ton of Pokemon building up around the same speed tier stat. You want to have them a little more distributed. And Revez had a couple of things kind of around the same speed, which is not totally ideal. He doesn't have the best availability of physically offensive mons. He has a lot of specially offensive mons, not a lot of physically offensive. The only physically threatening mons that I see on this team are Zygarde and Hitmonlee, maybe Ambipom to an extent, but everything else is pretty much specially offensive. So if he does come across a team with a really good physical wall that can shut down Zygarde and Hitmonlee, he might be in a bit of trouble. So he could have had a bit of a better split offensively. But yeah, I think it's a good team. I do think this is a team that could, it's 13th right now. I think it's one of those teams where it could probably jump to like 8th, 7th, 6th, or something like that. If it made a couple trades, maybe got rid of some of this fast fragility, and picked up some more kind of average speed threatening mons. I think it could improve his speed tiering and give him a little more balance to his team. But otherwise, great team. So coming in at number 12 are the New England Pat Rats. Let me get my notes up here. Are the New England Pat Rats with a score of 75.5. They are coached by Sleepy Sheepy, and they're in 12th place. Sleepy went for the Serene Grace Hacks combo. So annoying. He got the Jirachi, Togekiss. He also drafted Mega Sableye, Vaporeon, Garchomp, Scolipede, Type Null, Nidoqueen, Raichu, Talonflame, Wobbuffet, and Trapinch. This is kind of why I thought it was so nice to be able to give teams a score and kind of eliminate the subjectivity to it, because just based on looks, and I don't really mean this in an offensive way at all. Again, this is just for fun. We're just talking. I probably wouldn't have scored this team quite this high, just because I do personally feel like the Jirachi Togekiss combo, and I've seen this in a lot of leagues, is a little bit overrated. It seems to be something that a lot of teams really like to go for, and I'm just not personally a big fan of it. Just because I don't think it's the most reliable thing in the world. If you're running Jirachi with Choice Scarf or Togekiss with Choice Scarf, you end up in a situation very often where you have to hope and pray to get some flinches. And a 60% chance is just not good enough. It's one of those things where, people kind of get mad at hacks, but it is possible to draft teams that are more vulnerable to getting hacks if you're relying on things that don't have a great chance of occurring. Things like flinches, crits, things like that. It is possible to draft teams that are more unlikely to be hacks than others. And yeah, I'm just not a big fan of drafting things that kind of, you need these really inaccurate things to work for you to win. Outside of that, though, I think it is a very good team. I haven't seen much of Mega Sableye in leagues that I've been in. I just haven't seen it used that much. It's something I'm really looking forward to. I hope Sleepy has some success with it, because I do think it is a very threatening Mega, and I think it can be used. It can do really well on the right team. He's got Vaporeon, which I really like. I think Vaporeon's an awesome one. I've never had it. It's another one of those mons I've wanted to have, though, for a long time. Garchomp, obviously very, very scary mon. Great Scarf user. Scolipede is just a monster. I've faced this thing a lot in Draft League, and I hate facing it. It is so deadly. Just because it gets speed boost. It can throw up a Swords Dance, and it gets enough coverage moves that it can break through pretty much anything. This team has really good hazard setters. It has 3 Stealth Rockers and 3 Pokemon that can set other forms of hazards. Spikes, Toxic Spikes, things like that. But kind of like, it's been kind of a common theme with some of the, with just a lot of the teams in the Champions League. Sleepy doesn't have any Rapid Spinner on his team. He has some very good defoggers, though. Togekiss is an outstanding defogger. He does have Magic Bounce on Mega Sableye as well. So it's one of those teams where, yeah, it doesn't have a Rapid Spinner, and it could probably have a couple more defoggers, but it might not need them as bad as another team would, just because it has Mega Sableye on it. Mega Sableye can come in if it's Mega'd, and it bounces back any hazards that the opponent tries to set. So that's really nice there. Sleepy is missing a couple of key types on his team. He doesn't have a Grass type or Fighting. 2 types that, in my opinion, are really important. Just from my point of view, and having looked at the teams in the league in a really in-depth fashion, there are some teams in this league that really don't like coming across Fighting types. So not having Fighting on the team is kind of it kind of lets you down in that regard, because had Sleepy had Fighting, that immediately would have given him a foot up over certain other teams in the league. And like I mentioned before, I think Grass is just such a nice typing to have on your team, just because it fills such a niche role from a defensive standpoint. It's the only thing that resists electric and ground, and also resists water, which is nice. There's some really powerful offensive water Pokemon available in Draft League, so having a reliable resist to that is nice as well. I actually gave Sleepy the highest scoring for speed tiering. He has a really nice distribution of speeds. He has some really slow mons on his team, like Mega Sableye, and he has some really fast mons on his team, like Scolipede, Raichu, Talonflame. Really nice distribution. He has a nice variety, ranging from his fastest to his slowest. Just a great team in terms of speed tiering. But yeah, just a couple issues outside of that with some of his cores weren't finished, some issues with hazard removal. But overall, though, I think a really good team. Not a big fan of Talonflame, to be totally honest. I'm really upset that they nerfed it. I just don't really understand that decision. It was such a cool mon when Gale Wings was guaranteed to always be priority for, I think it's flying moves. But now that it has to be only when you're at 100% on Talonflame, it definitely limits its options to be a threat offensively. So I'm not a big fan of that pickup. I would probably like to see something else on this team, but other than that, I think it's a really good team. And yeah, I hope he can use Mega Sableye really well. So next up we have Helios. I think Helios did update his team name. I think I didn't add it to this video, but yeah, we have Helios, coached by Helios. Doesn't have a logo, unfortunately, but Helios scores 76, so we're starting to get we're starting to close in on that A minus range. And Helios drafted a team of Necrozma, Mega Charizard, X, Primarina, B-Sharp, Zapdos, Weezing, Doublade, Credilli, Flygon, Skuntank, Bruxish, and Dwebble. Really scary threats right up front in Necrozma. Necrozma's a beast. It is one of those Pokemon I haven't seen do particularly well in leagues I've seen it drafted, but it's just the potential of this mon. On paper, it's so threatening. Mega Charizard X, so we did kind of pick up the cursed Mega, and I'm saying that just because of the recent analysis in the GBA season, which is just finishing out right now. Someone picked up Mega Charizard X in the GBA, and some of the analysts were commenting about how this thing just doesn't really do well, and from the leagues I've been in, I kind of concur with that. I haven't seen this thing be the monster that I know it can be. It's one of those mons on paper where it should dominate, like 130 attack, 100 base speed, access to Dragon Dance, tough claws. This thing should dominate teams, but it just seems to not do it. And I think part of the reason might be just because it's so predictable. Almost always it runs Dragon Dance, Flare Blitz, Dragon Claw, and either Roost or one other coverage move. It's not the hardest thing to prep for. So we'll see if Helios can kind of let this monster loose. Primarina though, great Fairymon, is something that I've looked at repeatedly in the past as well. Zapdos, this thing, one thing I found about the teams that drafted in this league, it was a bit of a weird draft in that a lot of teams picked up bulk. There are a lot of bulky teams, and this team has a fair amount of that too. Necrozma is super bulky, Zapdos is very bulky, Weezing is bulky, Doublade, Skuntank is kind of bulky. He has definitely some nice wall options. Once again though, Helios does not have a Rapid Spinner. Again, very common problem with a lot of these teams that we've covered so far. No rapid spinning capability, and it's a bit of a disappointment just because he does have some nice hazard options. And if he ever gets hazard stacked himself in games where he wants to be hazard stacking, he has no option to get rid of just the hazard on his side. He either has to get rid of them all or he has to leave them all up. So having a Rapid Spinner, I think, actually would be a really nice addition to this team. Just like the previous team, Helios is missing a fighting type, which again, just because, again, depending on the league, it might not be as big of an issue, but having looked at the teams really in depth as I have, again, there's some teams that have big fighting type weaknesses and do not want to come up against a hard-hitting fighting type mon. Helios doesn't have that on the team, so that's going to be a relief to some of the opponents that he faces. Not the greatest speed in this team. This team's pretty slow. Just looking at it right now, I don't see anything. I don't think he has. Does he have nothing over 100? I'm not that great on memorizing speeds right off the top of my head. I don't think I see anything here that's above 100. I don't know how fast Bruxish is. But it's a pretty slow team, so I think that's a bit of a letdown too. I think Helios is going to be in a situation where I think a lot of weeks he's going to be forced to have to run Scarf users, and I also don't really see a lot of obviously good Pokemon that you just see and you're like, this is a good Scarf mon, like something like Garchomp. Garchomp loves running Scarf. It's a really good mon to run Scarf on. I don't think Helios has a lot of options that I see right now. Maybe Necrozma, Primarina. I'd say Zapdos, but Zapdos likes to typically run defensive. It likes to run leftovers with Roost, Defog, things like that. Flygon maybe, but it doesn't hit that hard, so I don't really see a lot of great Scarf options on Helios' team. And because of his lousy speed, I do think that this is a team too that I think could probably benefit from switching out some of these mons that are kind of mediocre speed stats for some more speedier threats. Just because it makes it harder for your opponent to prep against you. If you have nothing above 100, then anything they have above 100, they can very easily calculate their speed EVs without too much trouble. It makes it easier for them to prep against you. So I do think a couple trading out for some faster mons could really benefit this team. But yeah, some big threats in this team. If he manages to use Mega Charizard X really well, then I think he has the right support on this team to make it work well. And yeah, this is a team too I kind of look at and I go, this is a team that could have quite a few 6-0 wins and maybe some 6-0 losses as well. It could be very short games that either end quickly in his favor or quickly against his favor. So coming in at 9th, so we're skipping 10th because we have two teams tied at 9th. So the first one we're going to talk about is the Harrisburg Hitmonlee. I hope I said that right. Coached by Jerry, and Jerry got a score of 77. So again, if you want to kind of convert this to letter grades, these are now into the B+ teams. Jerry, I believe, was the first pick in the draft, and he first picked Mew, followed by Florges, Cobalion, Mega Absol, Rotom-Mow, Blastoise, Piloswine, Tornadus T, Chandelure, Haxorus, Venomoth, and Abra. Mew is awesome. Mew is a little bit like Charizard X, at least from my experience. I'm only talking about leagues that I've been in. I haven't seen Mew thrive the way that it should thrive on paper. Mostly because I almost seem to always see it be brought as a Stealth Rocker with support moves, or as a Calm Mind user as a sweeper. It's almost always one of those two, and it's almost a disappointment just because of how versatile this thing can be. It can bring any TM. And I think it's the reason why it's always drafted. It's almost always drafted in round 1 because it's so versatile, but I feel like most teams that do draft it don't actually tap into that versatility. I love Florges. I had this in a recent league. This thing's a monster. It is so hard to kill. Its special defense stat is absolutely insane. It is so hard to knock out unless you're hitting it on the physical side. Even the special side, like this thing can survive a hit no problem from even like I think if even a Specs boosted Nihilego with Sludge Wave, I'm pretty sure. Just a monster. Cobalion, very threatening. Not the biggest fan of Cobalion, but I do know that I understand why it's such a threat. I've seen this thing dominate before. Mega Absol is awesome. A surprisingly deadly mon just with its speed and its offenses. It's very fragile, so it does not like priority. Very scared of priority. Because decent coverage, stab knockoff with an awesome attack stat. Yeah, this team's pretty good. I really like this team. Haxorus is awesome. Haxorus is a mon that I've looked at myself a bunch of times in the past. He has some decent defense options on his team with Tornadus T, Florges, Cobalion. Blastoise can be pretty defensive. And yeah, his team, I'm just looking at my notes here where he lost some points from. He actually has really good hazard setters and hazard removers. Jerry does. The only thing I find is I've had Blastoise once in the past, and I understand that Blastoise is a decent spinner. I don't personally think it's worth the pickup just because, in my opinion, anyways, I think a spinner or any hazard remover should offer something else besides just spinning, and I feel like Blastoise only has Rapid Spin. It's the only reason I think it ever gets picked up, and I think it's the only reason it's even a tier 4. If it didn't have Rapid Spin, I think it'd probably be a tier 5. It has okay bulk stats, or defensive stats, but it has a really lousy special attack and attack stat. So it's one of those things where if it comes in even against like a ground type or rock type or fire type, it just doesn't hit hard enough to threaten out an opponent. So it doesn't get free Rapid Spins a lot just because it's not threatening enough to force a switch, go for the Rapid Spin instead, and remove Stealth Rocks or whatever that's up. And it doesn't get reliable recovery. So when it goes for Rapid Spin, and if it takes a hit, that's kind of permanent damage that it's taking. He does have Wish Passer in Florges, so that is an option there. But yeah, it's his only Rapid Spinner. I don't think it's a great Rapid Spinner, but at the same time, I don't think this team is very, let me check here. It's a little bit weak to rocks. He has 3 rock weaknesses on his team and only 1 resist. I believe his only resist is Cobalion. So it's a little bit rock weak. Who are his weaknesses here? Tornadus T, Chandelure, and Venomoth. So those are decent mons to like. They're good mons. So it's a bit of a rock weakness on his team. And I think the only resist he has is Cobalion. So it's a team that doesn't necessarily like rocks on its side. But again, it has Blastoise for a spinner. It's got pretty good defoggers too. Florges is awesome. I think Mew gets defog as well. So I don't think it struggles too much with hazard control. Filled out all of his cores really well. Does have some issues with typing. He has quite a few typings where he has fewer resists than he has that are weak. So there are some areas there where teams can take advantage of. Things like Ghost, Rock, Fire, what other types? Flying. There's some types that his team just doesn't really appreciate going up against. But outside of that, I think it's a really good team. So tied for 9th. So like I said, there's 2 teams that were tied at 9th place with 77 points. Next up, we have Atlanta Haunters, coached by Dirty Blur, and he picked up Kieran Black, Amoonguss, Empoleon, Mimikyu, Hippowdon, Greninja, Emboar, Honchkrow, Rotom, regular Rotom, Jinx, Mega Manectric, and Ghastly. So, in my most recent league, coached by Joey, he's in the regular league right now. Shout out to Joey. Joey's an awesome battler. In that league, he picked up Kieran Black and Mega Manectric. He absolutely dominated with this duo, so I've seen how deadly this duo can be. And Dirty Blur has picked them up. Kieran Black, one of the best wall breakers in the game. Mega Manectric, very fast, very threatening Pokemon. It doesn't get the best coverage moves, but it's one of those things that doesn't necessarily need the best coverage. Just with Thunderbolt, did you get Flamethrower? Or is it Overheat? I can't remember. It gets some fire coverage, Single Beam, Hidden Powers. Like, it doesn't need much outside of those moves. And yeah, those from an offensive standpoint, this team's just deadly. Dirty Blur also has the best defogger in Empoleon. Just joking. Not joking. Best defogger in Empoleon. He has a Moongus, Hippowdon. This seems pretty bulky. I would say this is one of the, like I was mentioning before, I felt like in this draft, teams really valued bulk. And I would say this is probably one of the less bulky teams. This is a very offensive team. He has bulk in Amoonguss, Empoleon, Hippowdon, but outside of that, it's a little bit fragile. He has a couple mons that are kind of similar in, I would say Greninja and Mega Manectric kind of fill a fairly similar role. Very fast, very threatening, but quite fragile at the same time. Hippowdon is pretty decent, but I do think that if you're going to pick up Hippowdon, I think in most leagues I've been in, Hippowdon is a tier 1. I believe it's tier 2 in this league, which I think is a much more fair place to put it. But even then, I think it's only deserves to be tier 2 if you're going to put it on a team that's going to abuse sand. And Dirty Blur doesn't have any sand abuse on the team. So I don't think it's still very good from a defensive point of view. Gets great defense stats, is a reliable ball in that it gets slack off, so it can recover off damage. Stealth Rock user, things like that. But I do think that the key reason you really want to have Hippowdon on the team is they can set sand for things like Excadrill or other sand abusers. And I think even picking something up like, I can't remember what that like lower, it's like a dog Pokemon, tier 5. I'm so bad with Pokemon names. But just something on the team that could have gotten Sand Rush, maybe like Sand Slash or something like that, just to take it, just to abuse the sand. Might have been a nice addition. What else to talk about this team? The team's got really nice hazard control, a nice decent, some nice options in terms of hazard setters, hazard removers. Filled out all his cores, kind of like, actually I was on the wrong team page there. Yeah, it still stacks up though. So like, filled out all his cores, nice typings, good speed tiering. Another team that doesn't have a Rapid Spinner, which is a bit of a problem, I think, just because you have Kieran. Kieran Black hates dealing with Stealth Rocks. It does get Roost, but it doesn't necessarily want to run Roost. It wants to run a Z move or be Choice Scarf, Choice Specs, Choice Band, or something like that. It wants to run those type of items, so those items can limit its ability to run Roost. So it doesn't want to have to deal with rocks. He does have Empoleon, great defogger. What are those other defog options? I think Rodent gets defog. I imagine Honchkrow. I don't know if he has any other defog options outside of that. So it's not the best hazard removal. It's pretty good. But yeah, I think a Rapid Spinner or maybe just another solid defogger could help out with the Kieran Black a little bit. His team has a bit of a hard time with ground. He has 5 ground weak and only 1 resist, one immunity in Honchkrow. Again, that doesn't take into account levitate users like Rotom. But yeah, it is a team that I look at, and it potentially, I don't know if Ghastly gets levitate either. I can't remember. I don't know if it's just Gengar that doesn't get levitate. Either way, I mean, Ghastly is a tier 6 in any case. It's probably not coming a lot. So it is a team that doesn't love, if it comes up against a really hard hitting ground type user, this is a team that could potentially struggle against it. So I think it's one of those cases where Dirty Blur could benefit from making maybe a trade to pick up either a Mono Grass, Mono Bug, maybe another Flyer, just to give him some other options to help deal with ground type, because it's probably the one thing, just looking at my notes, it's probably the one glaring thing that sticks out to me as something he could struggle against. But otherwise, yeah, like I said, a very offensive team. I think the Kieran Black Mega Manectric combo is going to be really deadly against a lot of opponents that he comes up against. And yeah, so moving on. So coming in at number 8 is the South Ajax Starmies. Gotta say, I love that name. I think it's just a really cool name. Coached by Easton. Easton scored 77.5, so just edging out Dirty Blur and I can't remember who the other team was, in 8th place. And Easton drafted a team of Kartana, Arcanine, Mamoswine, Mega Ampharos, Aromatisse, Gigalith, Mandibuzz, Celebi, Licky Licky, Sandslash, Anorith, and Starmie. And he did franchise Starmie, so that was on the team before we even started. First picking Kartana. I think Kartana's a really solid pick. It's another mon that I think that I haven't really seen people dominate with it in the way that I think it probably can be used. He picked up Arcanine second. I really wanted Arcanine. That was on my list. That was on my kind of dream team. I was planning to pick that up in like round 3 or 4 or something like that. It went round 2, which I definitely think there's a case to be made for it going round 2. It is a really good tier 3, and typically it is picked up very early on in drafts. He also has a Mamoswine, which is just I've had Mamoswine in the past. I've had to face it a lot, and it is such a monster. I don't think it's the easiest thing to use, just having used it myself. I do think it's one of those things where I don't think a team exists that can handle Mamoswine well. I think there's some teams that can survive Mamoswine, but no team can handle ice and ground coverage simultaneously. There's so few that can. Like Cresselia is like Cresselia or Suicune are like the only mons that come to mind that can actually handle this thing. Just because ground earthquake coverage and ice crash is just so good. But you do have to guess a lot of times. Most teams will have some mons that can handle earthquake and some mons that can handle icicle crash, but not a lot that can handle both. Mega Ampharos is awesome. It's not one of the better Megas around, but it hits really hard. It can run Rest, Sleep Talk, Volt Switch, Dragon Pulse. Like it's really deadly mon. He actually does have the Sand that I was talking about on, I don't remember what was the previous team that we were talking about, but he has Sand Setter and Gigalith, and he has Sand Rush capabilities and Sand Slash, so that's kind of a cool thing that he has on his team as well. Pretty decent hazard control on his team. He has 2 Defoggers and 2 Spinners, so this is a team where I would even question bringing rocks against this team. He doesn't necessarily like rocks. He's 3 rock weaks, 2 rock resists, so it's not a team that really likes having rocks on its side, but it has really nice ways of getting rid of them. So it's something that, yeah, I would reconsider even bringing rocks against this team just because of how well it can get rid of them. Starmie and Sandslash are both really solid spinners. Starmie especially, it has what Blastoise lacks in my opinion, in that if Starmie comes out against you, you have to really think very hard. Is this thing going to go for a spin or is it going to attack? Because if it attacks, I might die. So it has an easier time forcing switches and getting off free or safe rapid spins, whereas Blastoise just takes hits to the face because it just doesn't threaten out the opponent. Whereas Starmie's quite threatening. Again, Sandslash is awesome. Mandibuzz, great defogger, very bulky. I would say this team probably has fewer bulky options compared to some other teams. Mandibuzz, Celebi, Licky Licky, that's probably the main defense core in this team. Arcanine can be played quite defensively with Intimidate, but that's only if it switches in first and gets the Intimidate off. Outside of that, it's not super bulky. Kartana is fairly fragile. Mega Ampharos has decent bulk, but it's pretty slow, so it's not that difficult to revenge kill. But a pretty nice blend of things on the team. It's another team that's missing a fighting type. I don't really know why this is so common in this league. There's a lot of teams that don't have fighting types on them. And again, just looking at all the teams in the league, I think having fighting is really important because there's a lot of teams here that don't like fighting. Easton's one of the teams. He has 4 types on his team that are weak to fighting, only 3 resists. So not terrible. He has resists to deal with fighting, but it's one of those things, if he has a fighting type, let's just take a look here. Who's weak to fighting? Kartana, Mamoswine, Gigalith, who else is, and Licky Licky. And his resists are Celebi, Starmie, and Aromatisse. So if he comes up against a fighting type with like poison coverage, he's in trouble. Just because poison is getting against Celebi, it's getting against Aromatisse, and Starmie is not bulky enough to want to take like a poison jab or a gunk shot. So this is a team that could get run over by a really fast or really hard hitting fighting type mon, and it itself does not have a fighting type to kind of help deal with other teams that are also weak to fighting. But yeah, a really good team. Has a couple other weaknesses in terms of typing that it doesn't like dealing with. A bit weak to ground, a bit weak to water. And like I said, doesn't particularly love fighting types, but outside of typing, this team has a really nice balance of offensive pressure, defensive pressure, good speed, really nice hazard control, and just overall really nice team. We're definitely breaking into some of the better teams in this league right now in 8th place. So coming in at number 7, let's bring up my notes. We have the, I'm going to say this wrong, I apologize, the Tupelo Toxicroaks, coached by Pragmatic Win. And Pragmatic scored 78 for his team, and that bumped him up into 7th place. So like I said, we're getting to some of the better teams now. Definitely fewer negatives to talk about. And Pragmatic drafted a team of Tapu Koko, Hydreigon, Mega Beedrill, Excadrill, Slowking, Buzzwole, Hippo, I don't know how to say this Pokemon name, Hippopotas, Registeel, Serena, Dusclops, Alolan Raichu, and Onix. Tapu Koko, I believe Pragmatic was one of the earlier coaches in the draft. Tapu Koko seems to go fast, like really fast in every league that it's in. People just love to have this Pokemon. It's a Pokemon I've wanted to have for a while, and I just haven't been able to get my hands on. I feel like I've said that about a lot of Pokemon. Hydreigon, I'm not the biggest fan of Hydreigon. I find it a little bit underwhelming in that it hits pretty hard, but not that hard. It's pretty fast, but not that fast. Good coverage, but it kind of needs to run Life Orb or Choice Specs whenever it's brought, so it either Choice locks itself or it gets worn down with Life Orb. Mega Beedrill, though, I'm a big fan of. Never had this thing before, but it's something that's just been, it's dominated me in the past. It's such a threat with adaptability. Very, very fast, hits very hard with its dual type coverage. Great U-turner. He also has really nice hazard control on his team to help support Beedrill, which is huge. If you don't have good hazard support on your team, don't bother drafting Mega Beedrill because it'll just get worn down way too quick. He's got spin options in Excadrill and what's his other spinner? Serena. Both really good options for spinners. Serena is Mono Grass is pretty good defensively, so we can get off reliable spins. Excadrill, again, a very threatening Pokemon, so we can force out switches to get off free spins. And he also has some good defog options as well on his team. Good hazard setters as well. He is missing a fire type on his team. It's one of the few types that he's missing, or one of the only types as far as important cores go. So he doesn't have a fire type. I do think as far as mandatory typings go, or kind of core requirements, I do think fire is one of the less important types to have on the team. Generally speaking, most teams are not that weak to fire. Most teams will have a bulky water type on their team, or a fire type themselves that they can generally take fire type attacks fairly well. I don't think it's as important as some of the other types, but again, it does still fulfill an important role in finishing out fire, water, grass cores, and helping out in synergy that way. So he's missing one of those types. Doesn't have the best special attacking options. I understand that Koko hits pretty hard in electric terrain, but it's pretty much only with Thunderbolt. Thunderbolt in electric terrain hits pretty hard, but that's about all it has outside of that for special coverage. Dazzling Gleam doesn't hit that hard unless it's running specs or a Z-move. Hydreigon is obviously a very good special attacker, but outside of that, his options are kind of limited. Slowking is a really good defensive mon. It's going to want to run itself defensively most weeks. Like I don't imagine Pragmatic would bring it with choice specs or something like that, so it's not going to hit that hard specially. Alolan Raichu is really good as well. I don't know if he's planning to bring that a lot of weeks just because he has Koko. Alolan Raichu in electric terrain, it gets what's the ability? Surge Surfer. So it becomes really fast, and if it gets off like a nasty plot, it can sweep teams. But you are bringing then two electric Pokemon, two very fast, very fragile electric Pokemon. So it's kind of there's a lot of overlap if you bring both. So I don't know how much he's intending on bringing them both. It's not really a pairing that I particularly like, just because I think it's high risk, high reward. But the high risk is, in my opinion, just not necessarily worth it. Just because it's almost, if your opponent has a good ground type on its team, it's kind of like a dream come true. It can just fire off Earthquakes and you're suddenly in trouble. He does have the Sand though, so looking at this team, it's one of those teams that I'm looking at and I find more and more threats the more I look at it. He does have Sand on his team and he has Excadrill. So this is a team that didn't go for one of the more costly Sand setters in Gigalith or Hippowdon and went for Hippopotas. So he has Sand options available to him on this team. So just those first 4 picks there, Tapu Koko, Hydreigon, Mega Bijan, Excadrill, he has the support, I think, that he needs to make these Pokemon work. Again, I think it's a very scary offensive team. It's not the bulkiest of teams. Slowking and Buzzwole, pretty bulky. Registeel can kind of take hits on either side. Dusclops is decent, but it doesn't get reliable recovery. So he has okay walls, not the best walls by any means, but some pretty scary offensive threats. And yeah, I think overall this team is quite good. Getting up to scores of 78. Sorry guys, I need to keep drinking water. Over an hour in now. All right. So in 6th place, we have the Toronto Fire Chickens, coached by the Gamer. And the Gamer scored 78.5 to bump up to 6th place. And he drafted a team of Mega Alakazam, Dragonite, Blissey, Donphan, Toxapex, Metagross, Moltres, Volbeat, Pangoro, Electivire, Klefki, and Magikarp. This team has a lot of things that I wanted. In my own draft analysis video, I talked about how I really wanted Mega Blastoise. If I had to pick another Mega outside of that, it would have been Mega Alakazam. It's one of those Megas that I don't think it gets picked up very much. But on paper, it's just a monster. It's so scary, and it's one of those things where I haven't seen anyone else really take advantage of it, and it was something I was considering maybe showcasing how deadly it could be. So perhaps the Gamer will be the one to do that instead. Someone told me that Dragonite was the MVP last season, and if that's the case, then it's back again. It might be the MVP a second time around. This team doesn't have a lot of defense options, but the defense options it has are quite good. It has Blissey, Toxapex, which individually Blissey is so hard to kill, and individually Toxapex is so hard to kill. So he doesn't have a lot of mons that are, really good defensively, but the ones that he has again are very, very good. Donphan, great spinner, and hazard setter. This team is generally like really, really good overall for both hazard setting and hazard removing. Donphan again is a great spinner. It's quite threatening offensively just with its coverage. Stab, Earthquakes with its attack stat are very scary. It gets nice coverage as well in knockoff, Ice Shard, things like that. And again, it's a spinner as well. Team also picked up Moltres, I guess as its franchise Pokemon. He didn't franchise it, just as his logo. I've seen Moltres do work in leagues. It's I believe it's tier 4. People seem to get scared away of it. I mean, it certainly scares me away from this mon. That it's 4 times weak to rocks. But if you can handle rocks well, and again, I think this team does handle rocks pretty well, it can be really threatening. And I think it's on the right team for it to work well. He has Volbeat. Full disclosure, I don't really know what Volbeat does. I have no idea what it does. Pangoro, very scary offensive mon. Electivire, pretty good electric mon. Mono electric, I think it's tier 5 or something. I think it's really a valuable tier 5 pick. Klefki, really nice support for the rest of the team. It can set shields, which Dragonite really appreciates because it gets, is it Prankster? Is that what it's called? So it can set shields, and yeah, again, Dragonite is someone that really appreciates shields being up, just because of its multi-skill ability. If shields are up, it can very easily get off Dragon Dances, and if it gets off 1 or 2, it can potentially sweep teams. Dragonite is also really nice. It's another one I was thinking about picking up as well. Gets E-Speed, which I think is awesome. I love E-Speed on my teams. It's just such a nice priority option. One thing on this team is probably the number one thing that stands out. This team is also missing a grass type like a couple other teams were. Again, from a defense standpoint, I think it is something that is nice to have. I think it's a miss, or I guess you could say mistake in not picking one up. I think it fulfills a nice defense role on any team. This team is also kind of lacking in terms of special attackers. Even though his logo is of Moltres, I don't expect he'll bring Moltres every week. And outside of that, the only legitimate special attack on the team is Alakazam. Dragonite has a decent special attack stat, and it gets really nice special attack moves, so he could bring it especially offensive, but I don't think that's going to happen every week. And yeah, outside of that, Mega Alakazam is the only special attacker. So as far as where were points lost on this team, that was probably the number one area where he lost points from, is that he just doesn't really have, the gamer doesn't have great special attacking options outside of Mega Alakazam. Again, it's one of those things you could argue that Toxapex is a special attacker because it likes to run Scald, but again, it's not something I count as being an offensive mon at all because its stats are so low. Sure, it can use Scald, but it's not going to be doing any meaningful special attack damage. And yeah, so I think that's probably the biggest Achilles heel of this team is if this team comes face to face against a team with a really nice physical wall options, the gamer might have some issues breaking through that team just because if Alakazam can't do it, then he might not have any way to break through a defensive team just because he doesn't have a nice mix of offensive pressure. So it's another team I think he could probably benefit from switching out some of his physically attacking mons like maybe Pangoro or Electivire or Metagross and picking up some more special attacking options to balance out the team a bit. And coming in at number 5, so I'm sure some people here would have expected, or maybe at this point thought, hey, we haven't heard from the Ottawa Nidokings yet. Did he put himself first? No, I did not. So my team is in at 5th place. I am the coach of the Ottawa Nidokings, coached by me, Nerf, and my team scored 80.5 based on this scale. Also for my Nerf grade, I gave myself an 8, which kind of matched up with my score of 80. So I didn't favorably put my team above anyone else. I'm not going to go super. I'm going to talk probably the shortest about my own team just because I've already done a full draft analysis video of my team. If you guys want to check it out, it's already up on my channel. It was a fairly elaborate video, so I'm not going to talk about a ton here. What I picked up in this league was Zygarde 50%, Alolan Ninetales, Mega Blastoise, Shaman, Umbreon, Galvantula, Cofagrigus, Conkeldurr, Delphox, Staraptor, Aggron, and Slowpoke. I'm really happy with my draft in this league. I actually did think I was going to place higher based on the scoring system I put in place. I thought my team would have done better. I don't think it did bad. Like 80.5 is pretty good, but I thought I would have been maybe like 3rd or 2nd or something like that. But in 5th place, I don't think that's a bad place at all. I'm really happy with the team that I put together. I think it's a really nice mix of defense, offense, threat, and reliable walls. Zygarde 50% is just such a monster. It has probably the best spammable move in the game in 1000 Arrows. It gets my personal favorite move in Dragon Dance. I love that move. It can sweep teams all on its own. It has nice support on this team in the form of Alolan Ninetales. So Zygarde being 4 times weak to Ice can struggle to set up sometimes, just fearing potential hidden Power Ices or Ice Shards or things like that. With Aurora Veil up, it can more easily get off a Dragon Dance and sweep teams. Gets E-Speed just like Dragonite, which is nice. Alolan Ninetales weak to rocks. Mega Blastoise helps out in that regard. Can get rid of rocks, keep Alolan Ninetales healthy. Blastoise struggles against mono water types. Get some support from that in Shaman and Galvantula. Both Zygarde and Blastoise, they're not that fast. They are pretty threatening offensive mons, but they're not that fast. Definitely going to be helped out by Galvantula in the form of webs. If I can get webs up on the field and slow my opponent down, Mega Blastoise and Zygarde are going to have a much happier time of dealing with my opponent. So some nice synergy there as well. If I have webs up, I'm going to want to keep them up. So if my opponent does have a spinner, I can block any spin options with Cofagrigus. I ended up picking up Conkeldurr a little bit later in the draft. Like I said, I think having a fighting type in this league is really big because there's a lot of teams that don't handle fighting well, and Conkeldurr is obviously a really nice fighting type to help deal with that. Staraptor, something I've always wanted on my team and I've never really had, is a really strong offensive flying type because a lot of teams don't handle flying type Pokemon that well. So with Reckless Brave Bird from Staraptor, it does so much damage. Like most teams are not going to have good options to deal with Staraptor. As far as what kept my team out of top 3 out of a podium finish, filled all my core requirements. I think I nailed all the important types that I wanted to have on my team. Hazards options are okay. I have only one Stealth Rocker and Aggron, which sucks. My hazard setting is definitely not good in this team. I do have webs on Galvantula and Toxic Spice on Cofagrigus, so it's not terrible, but I would have definitely preferred to have a couple more Stealth Rock options. Pretty bummed that Zygarde doesn't get Stealth Rocks. I thought it did. I think it's kind of doesn't make any sense why it doesn't. My hazard removal options are terrible in this team. That's definitely the biggest drawback on this team. I only have one spinner in Mega Blastoise and one defogger in Staraptor. And Staraptor, I'm not going to run defog on this thing. Like, it's an offensive fragile mon. I'm not going to run defog on it. So in my mind, I only have one remover, and it's Mega Blastoise. Not a bad situation though, just because like if you want to compare Mega Blastoise to regular Blastoise, with Mega Launcher, Mega Blastoise scares out other mons. If I bring this in against anything that's weak to water, ice, fighting, dark, they're gonna switch out, and I can get off a free Rapid Spin without taking any damage. So I do think, even though I only have one spinner, I think it's a very good spinner. I think Mega Blastoise is arguably one of the best, so that's pretty good in that regard. My team doesn't have too many type weaknesses. The only disparities I have are Flying, Rock, and Fairy, where I have one Pokemon on my team that's weak, where I don't have an additional resist to. Pretty nice balance of offensive, pressure, and defensive in terms of physical or special. Pretty good speed tiering. I don't have anything super fast on this team. The fastest I have is Alolan Ninetales at 109. That's something I probably should have picked up as well. Something over like 115 or something would have been a nice addition to the team. If Staraptor was, let's say, instead of 100 base speed or 115, I think I would have had one of the best speed tiers in the league. But my team's a little bit slow in terms of max speed. My average speed is pretty good. But yeah, I think picking up a little bit more speed and maybe another reliable hazard removal would have made this. I probably would have bumped my team up into second or first or something like that. But yeah, I think my team. I'm really happy with my team. I think it's pretty solid. But there's a couple things I can kind of see on it that could have been a little bit better. So moving up into fourth now. So we're getting up to the top 4 teams. So in fourth place we have, and again, I think this is on the team too, that they updated their team name, I think, or something like that, or they're missing a logo, I can't remember. So this, in fourth place is Ketchuplant, coach in my division, and Ketchuplant scored 81 to put him in fourth place. And he drafted a team of Tangrowth, Mega Gyarados, Magnezone, Crocodile, Infernape, Tentacruel, Rhydon, Gardevoir, Miltank, Fungus, Gengar, and Latios. Very good team. Deserves to be, I think, where it is in fourth place. There's a couple things that stand out as potentially problematic for this team. Great speed tiering, very similar to my team actually. Ketchup and I place, I think we either tied for speed tiering or we were one place apart, because our teams are very similar in terms of speed. His fastest mons are at 110, mine are at 109, so it just barely edges me out in terms of max speed. In Gengar and Latios, they both sit at 110, which is not that fast. If your fastest Pokemon is 110, you definitely could have gotten a little bit more speed. But really nice distribution. He has a couple slow mons on his team to kind of discourage potential Trick Room setters. You don't want to set up a Trick Room if your opponent brings Rhydon. Rhydon loves to be in Trick Room. So things like that. Decent hazard setters, not the greatest removers. His only removal options are Tentacruel and Latios. Latios is a pretty good defogger. Tentacruel's a pretty good spinner. I think he's a little bit better than Blastoise in that it's a little bit more threatening offensively. It has the 100% hit accuracy, or 100% accuracy with Toxics, because it is a poison Pokemon. Doesn't hit very hard though. Kind of the same problem with Blastoise. It does get dual stab though, which is a little bit better. So decent removal options on this team. Could have been better. Filled out all his core requirements. A really nice spread of physical and special in terms of offense and defense. This team has a lot of nice options in both ways. Physical attackers in Gyarados, Crocodile, Rhydon, things like that. Really nice special attacking options in Magnezone, Gengar, Latios. He has Mix in Infernape. Infernape's a great mon. So really nice balance on the team. The only, I don't even know if I would call it glaring. I think it's a bit of a problem. The one thing that holds this team back, I think, from being, it would have been first place, I think, is if Ketchup struggles a little bit with some typing disparities. This team does not like ground at all. He only has one resist in Tangrowth, and I believe one immunity in Latios with Levitate, I think. I'm just looking at the team again. Yeah, and outside of that, he has 5 weaknesses. So Magnezone is weak, Infernape, Tentacruel, Rhydon, and Gengar. So this team really hates coming up against ground. If that ground type Pokemon, like this is a team, this is a great example of a team that will get absolutely nuked by Mamoswine. This is a team that can do nothing against Mamoswine. Tangrowth can't take Icicle Crashes. All his ground weak types can't take Earthquake, and Latios can't take Icicle Crashes either, and probably doesn't even want to take Ice Shard Attack. either. This team also has 5 fighting weaknesses. It does have 5 fighting resists, but it's another one of those situations where fighting types generally get pretty decent coverage, and if it's a fast enough or hard enough hitting fighting mon, it could potentially blow through this team. His fighting resists are Tentacruel, Gardevoir, Fungus, Gengar, and Latias. None of them are that bulky. Tentacruel is his only real true bulky mon. Fungus is decently bulky with Eviolite, but I think it's especially bulky, not physical. So if it happens to be a physically offensive fighting mon with the right coverage, so if it happens to have like close combat, Earthquake, Ice Punch, he can run through whatever that Pokemon may be, can run through this team. Earthquake will take a Tentacruel. Again, if it's a hard enough hitting, or Earthquake, which should do a lot to Gardevoir, it's not very bulky on the physical side. Fungus will get taken out by Ice Punch. Gengar doesn't like Earthquake, and Latias doesn't like Ice either. So it's a team where I think that it's really nicely balanced. It has some good bulk options, good wall options, some very scary offensive threats. But there's a couple areas in terms of weaknesses where if his opponent happens to have the right mon, the one right mon, it could prove really problematic for this team, because there's a couple typing weaknesses on this team that I think are a bit concerning. But yeah, outside of that, very, very nicely balanced team. So moving on to the 3rd place team. So we're up to the top 3 now. So these were the best teams in the league based on the scoring system that I put together. So in 3rd place is Stockton Poipole. I don't know if I said that right or not. Coached by Master Andy, and he scored 83. And Master Andy put together a team of Tapu Bulu, Mega Lopunny, Incineroar, Bronzong, Nidoking, Silvally, Pelipper, Xurkitree, Goodra, Kabutops, Cutiefly, and Drifloon. This is a stupidly offensive team. I think Master Andy is going to have probably the fastest game completion of any team in the league, either by loss or win. Like, just look at this. Like, Bulu, Lopunny, Nidoking, Xurkitree, Kabutops. Like, this is a really offensive team that doesn't have access to a lot of great wall options. Like, Bronzong is a good defensive mon, but doesn't get reliable recovery, so it's going to have a hard time getting back any damage that it loses. It has limited switch-ins. Goodra is okay with an Assault Vest, but again, no recovery, so it doesn't take much to wear it down. And that's about it. Those are the only really good defense options I can see on this team. He could bring Silvally with some bulk. Again, no reliable recovery, at least that I know of. So he doesn't have any really reliable walls on this team. It's almost all pure offense. And again, I think Andy's going to have an issue where he will either blow through his opponent's team and win in 10 turns, or his opponent will be able to survive those first few early on turns. And because of how fragile this team is, if his opponent can just withstand the early game pressure, Andy might just kind of burn himself out and not be able to win the game. So very offensive. One of the few teams that didn't pick up a ton of bulk. Chose the more offensive route. Doesn't mean it won't work. Not really my style, but again, that's kind of why we did this whole point system. Because again, my subjectivity on this wouldn't necessarily be fair. It's not a team that I would particularly want to draft. I just wouldn't be that comfortable using this team. But if he's comfortable using this, if this fits his play style, then this is a team that could run over a lot of people. Could pick up some, huge wins, 5-0, 6-0 wins, just with the amount of offense it has. And there's so many options. There's so many options. Bulu alone can beat teams. Lopunny alone can beat teams. Nidoking breaks through pretty much all walls. He has Xurkitree that can sweep. He has the rain options with Pelipper and Kabutops. Goodra hits hard. Like, he has so many options available to him. He did a really good job at balancing his type options on this team. The only types that he's even slightly weak to are ground, ice, and rock, but he has some nice resistances to those types as well, so he's not really weak to anything that I can really pick out. Nice balance of physical and special for both offense and defense, even though his defense options are kind of limited. Filled out all his core typings. Really nice hazard setting options and hazard removers. Like, again, I'm trying to find, we're getting to the point where we're kind of nitpicking as far as what our team is missing. He has nice Stealth Rock options. He has something else outside of that. Toxic Spikes on Nidoking, I think. some nice hazard removers. Doesn't have a great spinner. Kabutops, I believe, is the only spinner he has, which is definitely not a great spinner, just because of how frail it is. And if it's not in the rain, it's not the most threatening thing. So it'll have a hard time threatening out any of your opponent's mons to get off a free spin. So not the best spinner, but he's got some decent defog options. Pelipper's a great defogger. What are those other options? Drift Blim. What else can defog here? Oh, Savali gets defog too. Decent option there as well. So yeah, just a really nice balanced team. Again, it's gonna come down to, can he win fast enough? Can he break through his opponent's walls fast enough to win the game? Or if his opponent managed to withstand his offensive pressure, will he just kind of burn out quickly? So yeah, again, I do expect that Andy's games are gonna be pretty short. But yeah, just from an overall point of view, this team really isn't lacking much. Its speed could be a little bit better. This team's fairly slow. Outside of Lopunny, this team has nothing over 100 speed, which I think for an offensive team is a bit of a problem. But with that said, he has access to a number of Pokemon that are very viable Scarf users. Tapu Bulu doesn't mind having a Scarf. Nidoking doesn't mind having a Scarf. Obviously would prefer to have Life Orb, but it's a pretty Scarf user. Xurkitree is a great Scarf user. Goodra is as well. So he has some speed concerns, but I think he can make up for quite a few of them with some very good, reliable Scarf users on his team. So that's third place. Moving on to second. Just want to make sure my recording is still going. In second place, we have the Niagara Gengars, coached by Garrick the Bruce, and Garrick scored 84 for his team. Full disclosure, for those who don't know, Garrick is my brother, and I mean blood brother. So we've so far competed together in all the leagues that I've competed in, he's competed in. We've competed in them together. I just want to let you guys know that, just so people are wondering, hey, why is he in second place? So again, I wasn't picking where anyone placed. I came up with this scoring scheme, and I punched everyone's numbers into my kind of formula, and it came up with the final results. And based on these final results, Garrick ended up being in second place. So, and if you look at the team, anyone should be able to kind of figure out why fairly easily. So Garrick picked up Victini, Mega Venusaur, Suicune, Kommo-o, Raikou, Mudsdale, Stakataka, Spiritomb, Ribombee, Kangaskhan, Cloyster, and Porygon. So why is Garrick's team in second place? Look at those first three picks, and I need everybody watching this video to ask yourself, how did we as a collective league allow these three picks to happen? So Garrick and I did our planning together going to the draft. We both kind of talked about what we wanted, how should we structure each other's teams. We kind of gave each other some feedback. We talked very openly about what we wanted. I told him I wanted Blastoise, Zygarde, things like that. He told me he wanted Victini, Mega Venusaur, and Suicune, and I told him, you need to plan again, because there's no way you will get all three of those in 3 rounds. Like, Victini and Mega Venusaur are both very viable. They're usually picked in the first round. Mega Venusaur is arguably one of the best Megas. Victini is an outstanding Tier 1 Mon. And Suicune is very often gone in the second round. So I thought there's no way you're going to get all 3, and he somehow managed to get them. This is by far the best Fire, Grass, Water core in the entire league. Like, no one else comes even close to this. It's just insane. Victini is one of the best physical wall breakers. Mega Venusaur is probably the best bulky Mega that there is to pick. Suicune, again, probably one of the best mono bulky waters available. The only other thing that comes close that can even be in the same discussion is maybe Milotic. It's just an insane core. He can bring this every week. He doesn't even have to look at what his opponent's bringing. He can just bring those 3 and then kind of decide what are the other 3 he wants to bring. And the other 3, he has some really good options to pick from. Kommo-o, great. Outside of those 3 Pokemon, he was lacking kind of a really scary sweeper. Z, Sunny Day, Victini can sweep fairly well, but outside of that, he kind of was... Suicune is a good Calm Mind user, but Kommo-o gives him a Dragon Dance user, something that can sweep with speed. Is only 4 times weak to Fairy, but otherwise has decent resistances, so it can reliably get off Dragon Dance and sweep with Close Combat, Outrage, things like that. I think Raikou was a really nice addition to the team as well. It gave him a nice speed stat that his team was otherwise lacking at the time. Nice Volt Switcher, hits pretty hard with a special attack stat of 115. He picked up Mudsdale a little bit earlier on than I think I probably would have. I had Mudsdale in a recent draft league, and I do think that this thing is highly underrated. Since it gets Stealth Rocks now, being a mono ground type, it's just outstanding. It's a Volt Switch Denier, it gets Stealth Rocks, hits pretty damn hard. I think its attack stat is 125. So in terms of stab, Earthquakes, like it hits harder than Hippowdon and Donphan, I think. I believe, which is just insane. And it's like, I think it's a tier 4 pick. So great ground pick up there as well, I think. I think Mudsteel fits this team quite nicely. I love its ability and stamina. It just becomes a physical monster if it ever gets hit by anything. He picked up Stack Attacka. I'm not personally a fan of this mon. I think it's weird, and I think it's too hard to sweep with, I think. It's one of those things where you really need to be up against the right opponent, and you need the battle to be going just the right way to get the Trick Room set up. And the right coverage, and I don't think I'm not personally a big fan of the pick. I don't think it necessarily hurts this team. I don't think it's on the right team necessarily. I don't think Garrett necessarily has the best support for this thing to work. But it can set its own Trick Room. I believe Spirit Team gets Trick Room as well, so he might have support in that form. Trick Room or Spirit Team. Another Pokemon I'm not a big fan of. I don't really know how it's supposed to be used. It's not something I've seen picked up a lot, and I haven't seen it used a ton. So I don't really have much in terms of comments on it. Rabombi was a pretty good pickup. It gives his team Sticky Web options. It's also another sweeper. I don't think it's a very good sweeper, even though it gets Quiver Dance. Again, it's one of those situations where it needs to be against the right team to really sweep well. Quiver Dance is obviously a great setup move, but Rabombi has kind of a lackluster special attack stat and not the best offensive typing in Bug Fairy. He picked up Kangaskhan as his tier 5, which I think for his team was really good. It gives him a Wish user. Kangaskhan's pretty bulky as well, so it gives him another potential wall option. In terms of what stopped Garrett from being in first place, there's not much, man. Again, we're kind of at a point where we're nitpicking. He has a bit of a ground weakness on his team. He has 3 that are weak, and I believe only 1 resist. His only resist is Rabombi, which is obviously not a good resist to have. Rabombi doesn't want to come in on an Earthquake, even if it resisted. And yeah, he doesn't have the best options or the best answers for it. I don't think he has a flying type on his team, which is something. So he doesn't have an immunity to ground, which definitely is a bit of a drawback. Really nice spread, though, of physical and special typing for offense and defense. I think he was the only one in the league to get like perfect 15 out of 15 score for offense-defense split. Physical special split. Filled all his core typings. Not a lot of weaknesses outside of ground. Pretty good speed tiering. He had one of the higher speed tier scores. The one drawback I would say for this team is hazard removal is definitely not good enough for a team that has Victini on it. He only has 1 defogger, and I don't even know who his defogger is. I believe it's Rabombi, and 1 spinner and Cloyster. Cloyster is weak to rocks, so Cloyster doesn't want to run Rapid Spin. It doesn't want to be brought as a defensive one. It wants to be brought as a Shell Smash sweeper. So I don't think his hazard control is very good for Victini. Victini doesn't want to have to deal with Stealth Rocks. It wants people to come in for free, take no damage, get off a V-Crate, and switch back out. But with that said, I don't think that his team is going to be relying too heavily on Victini. There's so much offensive threats here and just such nice balance on the team that I don't think he's going to be relying on Victini every week to win him games. So I don't think his team outside of that is not that weak to rocks. So I don't think he needs removal that badly, but I do still think that he could benefit from trading off one of these mons, picking up another bulky mon, either another spinner or another defogger, just to help support Victini a little bit more. And yeah, that's pretty much the only thing I can really say about this team. Doesn't really like taking ground attacks too much and could probably use a little bit better hazard removal. Outside of that, I don't have much to say about this team. It's pretty solid. So with that, we are going on to our final team, our number 1 winner, and I'll just preface this by saying I do feel like I'm getting a lot of hate for this, just because of how badly people hate Stall. But the number 1 team is the Oregon Golducks. Golducks, coached by Ballistic, and yeah, I do know, I wasn't here last season, so I don't know any of the inside jokes or the inside juicy drama or whatever, but apparently, from what I've gathered, Ballistic is a Stall player. Apparently he's picked up Stall in the past. Apparently Clad was going to give his final verdict if this was a Stall team or not, or something. And just because of how much people hate stall, I figured people were going to be pretty pissed that Ballistic got #1 on this ranking system. But again, I just punched these teams into the calculator and it came up with these scores. So Ballistic got the highest score on this scoring system with an 84.5. He's the #1 ranked team. And he drafted a team of Celesteela, Mega Medicham, Chansey, Clefable, Delmize, Crobat, Druddigon, Salazzle, Pikachu, Alolan Persian, Dewpider, and Quagsire. This team's really solid. There's very few areas where I can really pick it apart and say he's missing this or he's missing that. Really nice speed tiering, really nice distribution of speed. It's a very fast team. Pretty nice split in terms of physical special and for both offense and defense. He has some pretty nice physical offensive options, special offensive options. He has a lot of physical bulk, a lot of special bulk. Filled out all his core requirements. Nothing really glaring in terms of weaknesses on his team. A touch weak to rock, ice, and flying, but nothing really glaring that I can see. He could have a little bit better hazard removal. As far as what's his spinner, but I mean he has the mons he has are pretty good. Like Delmize is a pretty solid spinner. Again, it has what I think a good spinner or a good remover should have, in that it's threatening outside of, it's not just a spinner. Delmize hits pretty hard with Power Whip, Shadow Claw, Anchor Shot. It's pretty threatening offensively. Crobat, a great defogger, just because its defense stats aren't that impressive, but its Poison Flying is a really good defensive typing. It can come in even on rocks and get off a defog if it's running Black Sledge or something like that. So yeah, he doesn't have a lot of removal options, but the options that he does have are very good. Yeah, it's a team that I'm struggling to really find any major flaws with. The only thing I do think that this team lacks, and this is one of the things that this scoring system didn't really, it's hard to quantify synergy. And I'm trying to comment on that, or I was trying to comment on that throughout this video, talking about the synergy of each team, just adding my own thoughts to it, but it's hard to quantify that. And one thing I do think that this team struggles with a little bit is synergy. I think, I know Ballistic said that he said repeatedly throughout the draft that he was going to be trying to draft a lot of offense and that he was not drafting a stall team. And I know Clyde was going to give the final verdict on that. My verdict, this is a stall team, 100%. Nothing wrong with that in my opinion. I think I'm one of the few people that doesn't hate stall. I actually look forward to facing it just because there are so few stall teams. Most people draft what I draft, which is bulky offense. And so fighting a team that's very different, in my opinion, is kind of a breath of fresh air. So I don't mind stall teams at all. I like seeing at least one or two in a draft league, just because, as I said, it shakes things up a little bit. But this is a stall team, 100%. I don't see any way that this team can be played other than stalling out your opponent. I understand it has Mega Medicham, which is probably the best physical pulp breaker in the game. With, what is it called? Is it Huge Power? I think that's his ability. Huge Power with access to High Jump Kick just decimates pretty much everything. There's only a couple things I can switch into that. Ghost types and Cresselia. That's about it. That's about all that can come in onto Mega Medicham and Wallet. But Mega Medicham's not that fast. It's very frail, so it can be revenge killed quite easily. And it's something that it can't hard switch in. It's too risky to hard switch Mega Medicham in and risk taking a hit. So it's something that has to come in for free. And so a team that has Mega Medicham on it should want to have a lot of Volt Turners. So Volt Switch users and U-Turners. I believe this team only has one Volt Switch unit in Pikachu, which is his, like, I don't think he's going to be bringing Pikachu very often. And one U-Turner, I believe, in Crobat. Crobat's an outstanding U-Turner. But again, it's the only one I see on the team. So as far as him actually being able to get Medicham in, I don't see a lot of options there for him. What I think is more likely is he brings something like Celesteela, Chansey, Clefable, Druddigon, Crobat, like his bulky mons, and tries to stall at his opponent. And whenever one of those goes down, he brings in Medicham in for free and tries to take something out. But that's a risky way to play, because every time you have to wait for something on your team to die before you can bring Medicham in. And even though when it comes in, something else on their team is likely going to die, it's kind of a one for one, eye for an eye kind of strategy, and I think it is kind of risky. So yeah, it's a very good team. Very few flaws I can see from the way I scored the teams. But I do think from a synergy point of view, I just don't think this is a team where Mega Medicham necessarily can thrive on. I could be totally wrong. I could be way out to left field with that comment, but just from what I'm seeing, I don't really see how Mega Medicham can thrive on this roster. This is a roster that I look at and I go, I think it's going to have to be a team where it wins through hazard stacking, and stalling out the opponent, bringing status, bringing reliable recovery. Again, not that that's a bad strategy at all. In my opinion, it's totally valid. I just don't see a lot of versatility on this team in terms of changing up your strategy week to week. I look at this team and I see there's a very clear way in which this team's meant to be played, and I don't see a lot of options outside of that. But again, I could be totally wrong in that regard. That's just what I'm seeing. So that concludes this analysis. I hope for everyone that did watch, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed my comments on this. I hope no one was too offended. I was trying not to step on toes or anything. Again, this was just for fun. I love Draft League. I love talking about Draft League. I love looking at the different teams people put together. I love kind of like fantasizing about how they can be played, about how would I go up against them and things like that. I love watching battles, talking battles. So yeah, this was it took a bit of work to put this together, but it was a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and yeah, if you guys did enjoy it and you want to see some more of my content, I'm going to be filming my battles. I'm going to be recording them live, so those should be up every week starting this week. I can't remember who we play this week first, but I will get around to prepping for that battle soon. But yeah, until then, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll talk to you later.